The folder slammed shut on her desk. "Interns don't belong in boardrooms," the manager sneered, his voice echoing across the office. Heads turned. She sat quietly, her badge dangling, her presence dismissed like she was invisible. To them, she was just another powerless young woman, someone to belittle, someone to control. What they didn't know was that in less than 10 minutes, the ground beneath their feet would shatter, and every secret they tried to bury would come crashing down. Have you ever been judged by someone who had no idea who you really were? Tell us in the comments. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Maya, a young black woman in her early 20s, had just stepped into the bustling corporate headquarters of one of the largest companies in the country. To everyone else, she was simply an eager new intern, quiet and unassuming, carrying a notebook and a hopeful smile. No one in that building knew she was the daughter of the CEO, the very man whose name was etched in gold on the building's entrance. For weeks, Maya blended into the background. She fetched coffee, carried binders, and sat in the back of meetings, listening more than speaking. To her, this was more than just an internship. It was a chance to see the company from the ground up, to experience firsthand how employees were treated, and to learn the truth behind the whispers she had heard about. Discrimination and abuse of power within the walls of her father's empire. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. The office buzzed with constant activity, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, and executives rushing from one meeting to another. But soon, Maya began noticing the subtle patterns that revealed the darker side of the workplace. Black employees were overlooked in meetings, their ideas brushed aside. Women of color were spoken over, their contributions credited to others. Meanwhile, certain managers thrived on intimidation, treating interns like disposable tools rather than future leaders. Maya felt her stomach tighten as she realized just how deep the problem ran. These weren't isolated incidents. It was a culture, a toxic one, that had taken root in the very company her family built. She knew her father cared deeply about fairness, but it was clear that not everyone running the show shared his values. Day by day, she witnessed more injustice. A young black accountant being scolded publicly for a minor mistake, while a senior manager's major error was brushed off with laughter. An assistant being forced to stay late without pay, while others walked out early. Maya kept her head down, her notebook filling with observations, her heart heavy with frustration. She wanted to step in, to speak out, but she couldn't. Not yet. Her identity as the CEO's daughter remained hidden, and she intended to keep it that way until the moment was right. What would you do if you were in Maya's place, watching injustice unfold, knowing you had the power to change everything, but not yet ready to reveal who you truly were? Before we continue, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Maya's days as an intern grew heavier with each passing week. What had started as quiet observations soon turned into a catalog of cruelty and corruption. She saw managers barking orders at junior staff like drill sergeants, belittling them for sport. She saw deserving employees denied promotions, while less qualified favorites were pushed forward. And she saw how racial bias played out in plain sight. Smiles for some, silence and scorn for others. One afternoon, the break room revealed more than Maya expected. She walked in carrying a stack of files, only to overhear two managers mocking a black employee who had just applied for a supervisory role. "Can you imagine her in charge?" one laughed. "She's better off staying where she belongs." The words stung Maya to her core. She glanced at the employee they were talking about, a hard-working woman who stayed late every night, who had trained half the office without ever receiving credit. Maya clenched her fists beneath the stack of files, biting her tongue as the laughter echoed in her ears. The deeper Maya went, the uglier it became. She uncovered how certain managers manipulated budgets, inflating expenses while cutting corners on staff benefits. She learned of projects deliberately sabotaged to frame employees they didn't like. Worst of all, she noticed how young black, Interns like herself were often treated as invisible, expected to do the grunt work while being excluded from real opportunities to learn. One day, a moment came that nearly broke her cover. During a weekly meeting, a junior analyst nervously presented a new idea. It was smart, creative, and had the potential to save the company millions. But before he could finish, the department head rolled his eyes. "Stick to the basics, kid. Leave the big thinking to people who know what they're doing." The analyst shrank in his chair, his voice silenced. Moments later, another manager repeated the same idea, word for word, and was met with applause. Maya's blood boiled. She wanted to shout the truth, to call out the theft and hypocrisy, but she swallowed her anger. She knew her moment was coming. The weight of secrecy pressed harder when one of the managers finally turned their attention to Maya. "You!" he sneered in the hallway. "Don't think you're here to climb the ladder. You're here to carry boxes and keep quiet." The humiliation cut deep, but Maya held her composure. To him, she was powerless. To her, it was confirmation. This was the culture rotting the company from within. Behind the scenes, Maya documented everything. She kept detailed notes, saved copies of reports, and quietly gathered evidence that painted a picture of corruption and discrimination. Every late night in her small apartment, she spread her files across the table, piecing together the full scope of what she had witnessed. The more she uncovered, the more she realized this wasn't just about mistreatment. It was about betrayal. Betrayal of her father's values. Betrayal of every employee who trusted the system. And as she looked at the stack of evidence growing before her, she knew the countdown had begun. The managers thought they were untouchable. They thought no one would ever challenge them. But in just a matter of time, the truth would hit them harder than they could ever imagine. Because Maya wasn't just an intern. She was the daughter of the man who built this empire, and soon she was going to tear down every corrupt wall they had built inside it. The day of reckoning came without warning. The managers strutted into the conference room, smirking as they prepared for another meeting where their voices would dominate and others would shrink into silence. Maya took her usual seat at the end of the table, notebook in hand, her badge still marking her as nothing more than intern. But this time, she wasn't just observing. She was ready. The department head began as always, boasting about numbers that weren't his work, ridiculing staff who dared to speak, and tossing thinly veiled insults at those who didn't look like him. The arrogance in the room was suffocating. Then came the moment Maya had been waiting for. She stood, her voice steady but cutting through the chatter like glass shattering on the floor. "I think it's time we talk about the truth." The room went silent. All eyes turned toward her, most with confusion, others with irritation. "Sit down, intern," the manager barked, his tone dripping with condescension. But Maya didn't move. Instead, she opened the folder she had carried for weeks, the one filled with every note, every document, every piece of evidence she had collected. One by one, she laid them across the polished table. Misused funds, stolen ideas, records of discrimination, proof of lies. "You've spent months thinking no one was watching," Maya said, her voice unshaking. "But I've been here all along, and you've left a trail of corruption that can't be ignored." Laughter broke out from one end of the table. "What do you think you're doing? You're nobody! You don't belong here!" one sneered. The others nodded, certain this was just a desperate intern's attempt to feel powerful. And then she said it, the words that ripped the smugness off their faces in an instant. "I'm Maya Johnson, daughter of the CEO, and today your time is up." The silence was deafening. Faces turned pale. The managers who had humiliated her, who had mocked others, who had thrived on fear, suddenly realized the ground beneath them was crumbling. Maya's eyes swept the room, unflinching. "Every file here is already with HR. Every report is already with the board. And by the end of this meeting, each of you will be out of a job. Phones buzzed, whispers spread. The managers fidgeted, their power slipping away faster than they could grab it. For the first time, it was Maya who held the room in her hands. What do you think happened in that moment? Did the managers fight back, or did they finally understand their reign was over? Tell us in the comments before we reveal how this story ends. The fallout was immediate. Security was called to escort the corrupt managers out of the building, their shocked faces etched with disbelief as employees watched in silence. For years, these men and women had ruled with arrogance, dismissing anyone who didn't fit their narrow mold. Now, they were the ones stripped of power, walking out with nothing but the weight of their shame. The office atmosphere shifted overnight. Whispers turned into cheers once the truth spread. An intern had exposed the toxic leaders. When staff learned that the intern was actually the CEO's daughter, jaws dropped. But what truly mattered wasn't her last name. It was the courage she showed in standing up when everyone else had been silenced. Her father, the CEO, stood firmly by her side. In the days that followed, sweeping changes were made. New policies were implemented to protect employees from discrimination. Systems of accountability were put in place to ensure promotions were earned, not stolen. And most importantly, every worker, no matter their race, gender, or position, was reminded that their voice mattered. For Maya, it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. She had seen how racism and corruption corroded even the strongest foundations, and she had chosen not to look away. By using her position to shine a light on the truth, she gave others the strength to believe change was possible. But here's the deeper question. How many workplaces still allow this kind of behavior to thrive in the shadows? How many talented voices are silenced every day because of prejudice and abuse of power? This story isn't just about one woman's bravery. It's a reminder that injustice survives only when it goes unchallenged. And sometimes, the most underestimated person in the room is the one destined to change everything. What about you? If you were in Maya's place, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have risked it all to expose the truth? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to share this story so more people can see how standing up against racism can rewrite the ending for everyone.